Imagine standing in a dimly lit chapel in Naples, Italy. The air is cool, faintly scented with centuries-old stone. You turn a corner and there it is, a figure lying still beneath a veil of marble. Not fabric, not silk, marble. Every fold, every crease, every subtle shift of weight beneath that translucent shroud is carved from a single block of cold, unforgiving stone. And yet, somehow, impossibly, you can see his face through it. The eyes, the lips, the unmistakable expression of a man who has suffered everything and is now at peace. You reach out instinctively, not because you're religious, not because you're moved to prayer, but because some primal part of your brain refuses to believe this is real. This is the veiled Christ. And after more than 2.5 centuries, the world's finest experts still cannot fully explain how it was made. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure you subscribe to Echoes of Time, because we're just getting started. The sculpture rests inside the Cappella Sansevero, a small Baroque chapel tucked into the heart of Naples. To the casual tourist, it might seem like just another stop on a crowded itinerary. But those who have stood before it, art historians, sculptors, engineers, even neuroscientists, often describe the experience in surprisingly emotional terms. Words like impossible, overwhelming, and haunting come up again and again. There is something about this sculpture that bypasses rational thought and strikes directly at something deeper. The question is, what exactly is that something and where does it come from? The man who commissioned this work was Raimondo di Sangro, the Prince of Sansevero, one of the most fascinating and unsettling figures of 18th century Europe. Born in 1710 into one of Naples' most powerful noble families, Raimondo was a polymath in the truest sense. He was a soldier, an inventor, a linguist, a Freemason, and, depending on who you asked, either a visionary genius or a dangerous heretic. The Vatican excommunicated him at one point, though he later managed to negotiate his way back into the Church's good graces, a feat that perhaps says as much about his political cunning as it does about his brilliance. He used the Cappella Sansevero not simply as a family mausoleum, but as a stage, a carefully curated theater of intellect, mysticism, and art. Every piece inside it was chosen or commissioned to provoke, to awe, and to demonstrate that the human mind, when properly cultivated, could achieve the seemingly miraculous. For the centerpiece of his chapel, Raimondo turned to a young sculptor named Giuseppe Sanmartino. In 1753, Sanmartino was given a commission that, by any reasonable standard, should have been impossible. He was asked to depict the body of Christ after the crucifixion, laid upon a cushioned surface covered by a burial shroud, all carved from a single block of marble. Sanmartino was 30 years old. He had shown talent, but nothing that suggested he was capable of what he was about to produce. What he delivered silenced an entire generation of artists. Antonio Canova, one of the greatest sculptors who ever lived, the man responsible for some of the most technically demanding marble works in history, visited the Cappella Sansevero and reportedly said that he would have given up his entire life's work just to have created the veiled Christ. That is not a compliment. That is a confession. So what makes it so extraordinary? The answer begins with physics and ends somewhere closer to philosophy. Marble, as any sculptor will tell you, is brutally unforgiving. It cannot be bent, stretched, or reshaped once it is cut. Every decision is permanent. Every chisel strike removes material that can never be returned. To create the illusion of a translucent veil, one that drapes naturally over a human face, clings to the nose and lips, pools in the hollows of the closed eyes, requires a level of 3-dimensional planning, so precise that modern engineers have compared it to solving a structural equation with no margin for error. The veil is not applied to the figure. It is not a separate piece attached afterward. It is the same marble as the body beneath it, carved in continuous, unbroken material. The sculptor had to envision the final result before a single cut was made, and execute thousands of individual decisions without a single catastrophic mistake. And yet, for nearly as long as the sculpture has existed, a stubborn and persistent rumor has shadowed its reputation. The story goes that Raimondo di Sangro, the alchemist prince, the excommunicated nobleman, the man who reportedly conducted strange experiments in the basement of his palazzo, had somehow discovered a process to petrify actual fabric, to take real cloth, treat it with some unknown chemical substance, and transform it into stone while preserving every natural fold and drape. It sounds like the plot of a Gothic novel. But the rumor refused to die, and in the centuries since, it has been investigated seriously more than once. Art conservators have subjected the sculpture to X-ray analysis, microscopic examination, and chemical testing. The verdict, reached repeatedly and conclusively, is that the veil is pure marble throughout. There is no fabric. There is no chemical trickery. There is only stone shaped by human hands into something that the human eye refuses to categorize as stone. What makes this even more remarkable is what the sculpture communicates beyond the technical feat. Sanmartino did not simply demonstrate skill. He created genuine pathos. The figure of Christ is not idealized in the way Renaissance masters might have rendered him. Radiant, powerful, transcendent. He is exhausted. The wounds on his feet are visible through the veil. The muscles of the arms suggest a body that has been through genuine physical trauma. The face, that extraordinary face, visible through layers of carved marble, carries an expression that resists simple description. It is peaceful, yes, but it is the peace that comes after suffering has been fully spent. Theologians have written about it, psychologists have analyzed it, and ordinary visitors, regardless of their faith or background, find themselves moved in ways they often struggle to articulate. The sculpture somehow manages to make you feel the weight of a story you may not even believe in. There is one more layer to this mystery that tends to get overlooked in the popular fascination with the technical aspects of the work. Sanmartino carved this masterpiece, and then, in the eyes of history, essentially vanished. He produced other works, lived a relatively quiet life, and left behind almost no written record of how he achieved what he achieved. No diary, no correspondence, no explanation. The single greatest technical accomplishment in the history of marble sculpture was produced by a man who apparently had no interest in explaining himself. Whether that silence was modesty, secrecy, or simply the habit of a man who worked rather than talked, we will never know. The technique, whatever it was, whatever extraordinary intuition or discipline or genius guided those hands, died with him. In the 21st century, the Cappella Sansevero receives hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. Photographs of the veiled Christ circulate endlessly on the internet, generating the same reaction in comment sections across a dozen languages: disbelief. People who have never cared about sculpture, who have no interest in Baroque art or Italian history, stop scrolling when they encounter this image. Because the human brain, it turns out, is exquisitely sensitive to impossibility. We are wired to notice when something violates the expected rules of the material world, and the veiled Christ violates them spectacularly, quietly, and without apology. What Sanmartino created in 1753 was not simply a sculpture, it was a challenge to every artist who came after him, to every scientist who has tried to reverse engineer it, and to every visitor who stands before it and finds themselves reaching out to touch a veil that their eyes insist must be soft, must be real, must somehow give way beneath their fingers. It never does. It is marble. It will always be marble. And that gap between what you see and what you know is where the real power of this work lives. Some questions in art history have answers. Some mysteries yield eventually to enough research, enough technology, enough time. But the veiled Christ sits in its small Neapolitan chapel and offers nothing so convenient as a solution. It offers only the experience of standing before something made by human hands that feels, undeniably, like it should not exist. And perhaps that is precisely the point. Perhaps Raimondo di Sangro, the prince who wanted his chapel to prove the limitless potential of the human mind. I understood something we are still catching up to. That the most powerful thing art can do is not to answer questions, but to make you feel, in your bones, that the world is stranger and richer and more astonishing than you had allowed yourself to believe.